We are here with Oscar-winning director Ron Howard of A Beautiful Mind, now with his latest awards entry, 13 Lives, that tells the story of those 13 Thai boys trapped in a flooded cave back in 2018. And if you think you know that story, you don't until you see this amazingly compelling film that's now streaming on Amazon Prime. I'm Tom O'Neill with Gold Derby, here with my colleague Matt Noble. And I'm going to take the first question, Ron, which is, it always amazes me that when a director has the guts to take on a story where the audience already knows the conclusion and still make it a compelling watch and such a successful movie that this is a top awards contender. Why do you do that, and how do you do that?
Well, it's what I learned on Apollo 13 was that if you can get granular enough on a kind of physical level, and you can be detailed enough on a character level, you actually create suspense, because you may, as you're watching, you may kind of know what the general outcome is, but you don't know what the cost was. You don't know what the really specific, most personal challenges were. And in this case, when I read Bill Nicholson's script, this is not something I developed. It's something that came my way, and I read it, and I kind of thought I knew the story, and there were so many twists and turns. And once I jumped on and started doing my own research and corroborated that Bill wasn't just Hollywoodizing this, he wasn't just making up a lot of stuff to be dramatic. And I was really hooked. Secondly, so I felt like I could sustain the suspense with this, that there was enough to reveal. But I also felt that I personally did have a lot of filmmaking experiences, which made me believe I could do a good job of fulfilling the kind of cinematic promise of this movie. And there were already documentaries that existed. There was already a low budget version of the movie that existed. There were going to be more. I knew this, and yet I was so caught up by really putting under a microscope what they achieved, and that this theme of sort of cross-cultural cooperation and what it meant and what it said to us specifically today. That I just felt like I just wanted to contribute to shining as much light on this story as possible.
Matt?
When I spoke to the editor of the film, Ron, he said that you had said it was sort of the anatomy of a miracle is what the story was you were trying to tell. As you were getting into that sort of granular detail of the story, what sort of interested you or captivated you the most, and you wanted to sort of have the through line there?
The volunteerism. It went beyond professionals, applying, everything that they were trained to do under duress. Which is sort of an example of Apollo 13, for example, or even Cinderella Man, where, it's very uphill for the Russell Crowe character, Jim Braddock, but he is a professional boxer. He's doing his thing. The odds were against him, but he's doing what he's trained all his life to do. Well, here you have the divers, but they're hobbyists. You have this water engineer who's up on the mountain trying to divert the water away from the sinkholes in the cave that are intensifying the flooding, but he doesn't have to be there. So many of the people who really made the difference did not have to be there. And to recognize that, and then go further and see that, as they were there, it was beginning to look like no good deed going unpunished, because on the emotional wear and tear, the physical, the physical threats were there, but emotionally, personally, professionally, politically, all of, they just kept taking on more and more risk. And yet at the end of the day, this is a story that disproves that old adage, no good turn goes unpunished. They actually did it. They did it. And this is why you do these true stories, because they're proof positive that these things can, are possible.
And the whole world could gather together to join hands and make it happen.
And you could do all of that, and by taking a really good, clear-eyed look at it, it's not sentimental.
Yeah.
Because it's not always pretty, it's not always easy, it's not, and Ben Wallfish's score, we really tried to stay away from anything that would sentimentalize this. But starting with the Thai government that sort of opened its borders and was willing to ask for help while never ever taking their own foot off the gas and doing everything they could to commit to getting these boys out. Some of them weren't even citizens, and yet they were there for them 110%. I just thought I thought it was a great story. And look, I'm a movie director. I thought it was cinematic. I thought it could be suspenseful. I thought that it had a chance to be a memorable, feature film.
But you had all these obstacles, like I read somewhere that you weren't able to get the actual rights to the boy's story, for example.
Correct.
And that when you built this set to recreate the caves and the water and the rest of it, that Colin was so terrified of it that he had anxiety attacks.
Well, I have to tell you, I heard about that. I heard about that later when we were doing press. But I got to tell the story of the actors and the caves. Molly Hughes built these amazing caves, and she worked closely with the divers and looked at the specs of the actual Tam Luang cave system, and we found all the trickiest, most sort of life-threatening sections of the cave to sort of recreate these difficult maneuvers, and both getting to the boys and then trying to extract the boys. And we had the real Rick Stanton and Jason Mallinson, two of the four really key divers, and they were our technical advisors, and they were there. So the real heroes were around, and they began training the actors. And I assumed that the actors were going to do a good portion of this diving because it was relatively safe and controlled, but certainly not. There were certain things I assumed they would not do. But Viggo came to me with Colin and said, now that we've learned how to do this, it's so specific and it's so particular. Frankly, we don't trust even the best stunt person to do it the way we would do it. It's very particular, and Viggo said, I want to do it all, and Colin said, I'm in. Me too. And Charlie Crowell, our stunt coordinator and second unit director, and the safety team, they signed off on the viability of that and the safety of that. It still was tricky. We managed to reschedule. The actors, just were willing to work on every spare hour they had. They would get over to the water tank and get in and make themselves available. And it made a huge difference in terms of building suspense and credibility and making it seem, as much as possible like you're really right alongside those divers as the shots would unfold, and you'd recognize, no, that's really them, that's really Viggo, that's really Colin and Joel, etc. And every time I would ask, even though I'd been skeptical of this and concerned, every time I would ask, how's it going? It would just be thumbs up, great, Ron, going great. And then later I found out they all had panic attacks. They all were terrified at various times, because in those tunnels, you're still alone. I mean, there's only, you can't get safety divers into these spaces.
And some of the spaces
tight.
are only 3 feet wide, right? Yeah.
That's them being cave divers, and to the point where they actually became so adept that I asked one time, could you take a mini cam and do like a selfie pass? Can you swim it, with one hand on the guide rope and the other hand out in front of you, and get a really tight close-up, because we literally couldn't get our camera operator in there close enough going through those tight spaces. And they did them. And then they started doing point of view passes where they would actually, follow the other divers or go through those dark corners and give you that haunted house feel of, oh my God, what's around that corner? Should they really go there? Should they squeeze through that pinch point? And it made all the difference in the world. But I realized that there was some psychological collateral damage along the way, and I hope they're all healed up and feeling proud of themselves.
Before we
They
get
are.
to Matt, toss back to Matt, let's remind everybody, 18 days they were in by the time the last guy got out. The journey of the divers took 8 hours, was it?
At
To go
times,
one
yeah.
way. Wow.
Yeah.
The boys were running out of oxygen. It's like the ultimate horror movie. You're buried alive, and here comes a flood. There's no food. Just
well, it really was extraordinary, and it was cinematic. And as Bill Nicholson said, who started the project, a year before I ever got involved, it just laid itself out in a very suspenseful movie narrative. And the one thing that I wanted to do, and Bill had begun it with the screenplay, but very important to me to round this out as an ensemble, to make sure that we followed as many of the storylines of the Thai characters as possible. And, again, I called a little bit on my experience of Apollo 13, where the initial draft spent so much time in the capsule and would occasionally touch on mission control. And when I began to delve into it, I realized that it was not just a survival mission in space, it was also a rescue mission from mission control. And we really developed those characters and that storyline. And I wanted to do the same thing here with the Thai characters, and discovered things like this Tanet and Siri, this volunteer water engineer who was even living in America at the time, but he had a nonprofit that he participated in that happened to be in Bangkok. And he thought, well, maybe I can go help. And he went up there and led this draining program that, which meant they were basically creating little dams out of sandbags and whatever else they could find and trying to divert the water. But when they diverted that water, it destroyed the crops of a number of farmers and ruined their year. They said yes, and with no promise, no guarantees from the government that they would be supported in this. Ultimately, the government offered that support, but it's just the spirit of the Thai people that made this thing possible. And I just wanted to acknowledge it, and I just kept finding more and more interesting behaviors and revealing twists and and surprising barriers and challenges, so that it really did feel like 5,000 people were being tested. They volunteered, but it wasn't just the boys who were under duress. And it was a great challenge. The other big challenge for me, and the one that really gave me pause before I said yes, was recognizing that the initial screenplay suggested maybe 20% of the movie would be in Thai. I felt like that percentage would go up, knowing what I wanted to do to sort of flesh out.
And it would have to be in the specific dialect of that part of Thailand, too.
Well, both. There's the Bangkok Thai, the sort of the mainstream Thai, but in the north, it's a very extreme dialect, like to the point where people from Bangkok can't necessarily understand everything that's being said in the north. And I wanted to depict both of those things. So I was able to, not only deputize the actors, but long before that, I brought in a couple of guys to sort of just help with the translation. One guy was a Thai writer producer. The other one was a young, really interesting Thai director and writer. And their job was to sort of begin this translation, but to make sure that it wasn't just an academic translation, that it was really capturing the spirit of the scenes as Bill had written them, or as we continued to learn about through our research. And they did that, and they were so good and so helpful on a cultural level, in addition to shaping the dialogue and so forth, that I had them helping me with casting. They're the ones that told me about the dialect. Billy, the director, the young director, he became really in charge of the boys, and none of them were actors, because I needed to have the boys needed to be from the north, because I knew they were going to have to ad lib a lot, and they'd have to ad lib in the northern dialect. So I didn't want to go through a thing on our shooting days where we were trying to translate and enforce some sort of dialect onto the scenes. And so the whole thing became this sort of our own version of a cross-cultural exercise. Ours wasn't life or death, but it was mighty damn important to me to get it right. It's a Thai story, and I wanted Thai audiences to look at it and feel like it was, that it could have been made by a Thai filmmaker. That was my sort of mantra. And And the reaction from Thailand has been just great, better than I could have ever dreamed it would be. But it brought so much specificity. It also really brought the actors out. The Thai actors, many of them very experienced, some of them very green. This combination really rose to the occasion. Of course, it was a story that they were proud of, but I think when they recognized how important the accuracy, cultural accuracy, and authenticity, and the specifics of each of their characters and their relationship to the crisis was really important to me, and they contributed, in a way that look, I love directing actors, and I love the collaborative process. This was probably the most extreme version of that I've ever really had.
Yeah. I love like hearing about some of these stories and stuff, because in many ways the film is about solving problems, and you as a filmmaker has to solve all these problems and challenges and address these things, as you say, with lower stakes. I feel in like sometimes like there could be a danger in Hollywood of like ego creeping in. However, like to be a storyteller and to tell stories like this in 13 Lives, you need like a certain level of like empathy. So like, how important is it, like empathy in telling stories, Ron?
Well, I think we were all driven by that. I mean, I don't think I've ever had a movie where people complained less than on this movie. And believe me, there were very few days where anyone was comfortable. It was rainy. It was muddy. It was real hot. We're, Queensland in the summer, in the summer there. Then we were making rain, and then it got cold because we, and so it was a challenge. Also, a big cast. There were days where I literally had 10, 12 principals, that I was trying to cover in fairly complicated scenes, and I did not want it to look like it was organized and presented like it was highly staged. And that's its own kind of dance, to sort of sort that out and get it covered properly. And Sayampu Mukti Pram, our cinematographer, who's Thai, so helpful in so many levels, as you can imagine, solving the underwater problems, but also always being a kind of a cultural consultant, along with all the the cinematic demands of the job. But everybody just threw their shoulder into it. And you talk about no ego. I mean, Viggo, Colin, Joel, Tom Bateman, they were in their wetsuits all day long in the days that they were supposed to be in the water. They were eating lunch in their wetsuit. There was no going to the trailer. They didn't do that. They made themselves part of the ensemble, and the Thai actors saw that, witnessed it, felt respected, felt they were part of something, and I appreciated it every day. But we had an okay amount of money, but it was a hustle. We were just moving. We were doing 50, 60 setups a day. It was really, it was hard work, all in the name of just trying to capture as many details as we possibly could and take them to the editing room. And I knew, James Wilcox and I work well together, and I knew that as it had been on Apollo 13 and a couple of other movies I'd made, the film was really going to be found there. And I'm very grateful for those past experiences, but also the recent experiences, more recent experiences making documentary films. I think it helped me in the shooting. I think it helped me in the approach. I think at times it even helped me in the directing of the actors, because I've actually seen now through the docs some scenes that were captured by the documentary team of people under real duress. And it looks a little different than we would necessarily stage and direct actors to play a scene like that. Sometimes it's surprisingly understated, and sometimes it just, people will literally drop to the ground. I mean, the extremes are a little more surprising than I would have necessarily thought or imagined. I think if I was just staging it without those other filmmaking experiences in my recent
There are
background.
times watching it, I felt it was a documentary, that it was so real and it was connecting with me so powerfully. By the way, everybody, this movie has a score of 95%, an audience score at Rotten Tomatoes. That's how powerfully it connects with
Well, thanks.
viewers. And you think you know the story, you remember watching it on the news, but I didn't really know about the big gamble they were taking with the anesthesiologist and with the oxygen and all of these enormous problems that suddenly were thrown in everybody's way to solve, and they better solve it in a hurry.
Well, thank you. Look, again, we all knew that it was a great story. It had been written about. There were books out there, documentaries, other films, whatever. I think we all just felt like if we could do, a really quality version of helping the audience empathize, understand, relate to, and be, kind of come to terms with what that kind of commitment and investment looks like on the most human level. It's not easy, and there's a risk reward component there, but they never thought there was never any assurance they were going to succeed. In fact, they were all pretty sure they were going to be kind of shattered by the outcome. And yet they carried on.
And 2 SEAL unit soldiers died, didn't they, during this?
Yes, they did. And of course, when you talk to Thai, the Thai actors, Thai crew members, they are very proud of the outcome of this. Their culture, their leadership, they did a great job. But it's not celebratory for them, because those who lost their life, to them, that it's not it's that's a tragedy, and those are sacrifices to be respected. And particularly Saman, who was a volunteer diver who lost his life in a cave. Weir Sakalawat played that part. He's a very well-known actor, and that's a fairly small supporting role in the movie compared to the kinds of roles he normally does. He was there and committed to trying to demonstrate this again in an unsentimental way, but to show the respect and the understanding and the kind of level of that sacrifice. It was it was fascinating. I think I underestimated a little bit the degree of difficulty of the movie going into it. I've done a lot of work in the water. I was very challenged by the idea of the Thai culture, but in other films, Rush, the Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code movies, where it's been important to scenes in language that I don't speak needed to be very effective and to work. And I've developed a sort of a system for trying to achieve that. But I really I underestimated how difficult the cave shooting was going to be, and that when you add that element,
there was no visibility in the water. I mean, how could you shoot that as well?
Solving the lighting problems was really creative and technically very astute, and it took us a long time. We didn't quite have it until just about the time we were beginning to shoot principal photography. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking on our end. But we had lots of great news footage and documentary footage, and we looked at it, and we kept trying to understand the various activities and what people were doing, laying hose, piping, pumping, even when they ran out of pipe up on the mountainside and they were trying to drain the water away, we discovered just through our research that this village elder had said, oh, we could just cut the bamboo in half and create these troughs, lash them together, and we can drain a lot of water that way. And it worked. And when you go deeper into the research, you actually see, a lot of this. And well, that wasn't in our initial script, but it was certainly something I put into the movie. And it was great. The actor who was playing that village elder, who's actually a musician, like a kind of an old rock star from Bangkok, but he made the most of the role. And when it came time to split the bamboo, he knew just how to do that. So somewhere in his life, he'd been in the jungle.
All right, last question to you, Matt.
Well, okay, I'm gonna go somewhere a bit left field here, Ron. you've talked about how you've been influenced by documentary films and things like that. Another project that you won an Emmy for producing was Arrested Development. And like, is there any, as ridiculous and clever, but ridiculously silly that show is, are there any lessons you learnt from that you can take into more serious projects like this?
You know, the aesthetic for Arrested Development was born out of kind of an observation that I made 20 years ago, which is just that, you know, YouTube and reality television was creating a kind of a new grammar. And when I talked to Mitch Hurwitz, I said, I think if we apply this new kind of spontaneous vibe to a family comedy, I think we could have more comedic density. You know, I just feel like it'll feel like you're there, you're right alongside them. You know, we hadn't seen or didn't know anything about the Ricky Gervais version of The Office at that point, which was working in a similar way. And but Mitch took that and really ran with it. And so in some ways, that sort of loose, you know, kind of under-rehearsed, spontaneous staging and shooting played for laughs was something that I've put to good use on films, even like Rush, Frost Nixon to an extent, and really rigorously and thoroughly on you know, on 13 Lives for sure.
Well, good luck in all the awards races you have ahead. You've already got a mountain of awards behind you, but a big career ahead too.
Well, thank you. I think it's a really interesting creative year, and it's you know, I'm obviously proud to have the title mentioned. There's so many areas where people really extended themselves, you know, especially on editing. I think James Wilcox just was spectacular. Our sound design team, you know, really helped us tell the story in you know, in such a compelling way. And you know, they're just, again, everyone just wanted to do everything they could and bring their A game. They brought their A+ game, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, congratulations.
Pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.